Elie Wiesel said, "The dead and the living, we must bear witness." Our Howard County Yom HaShoah Holocaust Remembrance service this evening bears witness as we focus on keeping the memory alive. I am Rabbi Linda Joseph from the synagogue Beit Aviv, who is hosting our virtual event. On behalf of our president, Ozzy Seiner, and the board of Beit Aviv, we welcome you to our spiritual home here at Oakland Mills Interfaith Center. Each person present honors the memory of those who perished in the Holocaust. We acknowledge each one of you in this room and all who are attending virtually. We welcome elected officials, clergy, and lay leaders from many faiths who've taken the time to join us in remembrance. Know that your support is valued by the Jewish community and by humanity. We especially greet the following individuals who took the time to tell us that they are attending online. Jessica Cook, representing Maryland U.S. Senator Ben Cardin. State Senator Clarence Lamb. Representative Eric Ebersol. Representative Jessica Feldmark. Howard County Council Member Deb Young. Howard County Council Member Christina Rigby. From the Howard County Housing Commission, Peter Engel. From the Howard County Office of Human Rights, their administrator, Yolanda Sonnier. Candidate for Representative, Pamela Guzzoni. From the Howard County Muslim Council, Zunaira Awan. From the Council of American Islamic Relations, their director, Zainab Chowdhury. From the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Columbia, Reverend Paige Getty. From Kitamakundi Community Church, Pastor Claire Matheny. From Christian Counseling Associates, Andrea Morris. And from Luminous and the Afghan Alliance, Mike Mitchell. So many people are to be thanked for putting this event together. Many of those individual names are in the program, thus I'm going to offer a broad brush of appreciation. An enormous thank you to the Howard County Yom HaShoah Programming Committee for all your advice, hard work, volunteer hours, and care. So many of you are keeping the memory alive of your beloved family members. May their memories and your labors be for a blessing. Some vital committee members were inadvertently omitted from the program and deserve public acknowledgement. Randy Gartner and Maury Kogel, both of you put much time and effort into bringing this event to fruition. I want you to know that you are appreciated. We're also grateful to the Beit Aviv members who give of their time this evening to volunteer at this event. An advance thank you to our panel, Maury Kogel again, and his daughter, Hannah Kogel, and the facilitator of discussion, Rabbi Craig Axler. We're also pleased to welcome the Howard County High School Gifted and Talented Orchestra to share music this evening. And other students have participated in our essay and poetry contest. We hope that you will take the time, if you've not already, to read their writings online. Having the next generation involved ensures that we will continue keeping the memory alive. In Howard County, we have an amazing group of clergy under the auspices of the Howard County Board of Rabbis. My colleagues, your participation and support truly makes this a community event. We're also blessed by other clergy, a rabbi, cantors, and cantorial soloists who bring their gifts to Howard County and who have agreed to participate this evening. We are grateful for your partnership. This event has a vital collaboration with the Howard County Jewish Federation. We thank their president, Dr. Rachel Simon, and their board of directors. We are grateful for the input of Shauna Levy, Director of Community Engagement, as well as all the staff of Federation who gave of their time. And my final thanks goes to our next speaker of welcome, Joel Frankel, the Executive Director of Federation, whose leadership in this community takes us from strength to strength.
Thank you, Rabbi Joseph. I'm grateful for your leadership and for all the hard work you and the committee have put in to make tonight possible. And I am appreciative of the collaborative spirit that you and all of the rabbis in our community bring to everything you do. This event is a great example of how the Howard County Board of Rabbis and the Jewish Federation of Howard County can inspire and lead the community together, yad b'yad, hand in hand. It is an honor and a privilege to welcome everyone here and everyone online to this program on behalf of the Jewish Federation of Howard County. As I've come to learn in my first 9 months in this role as the executive director of the Federation, this community-wide Yom HaShoah program has been taking place annually since 1979. At that point, we were still operating as the Jewish Council of Howard County, which had been formed in 1967. It was not until 1992 that we formally and officially became the Jewish Federation of Howard County. I mention these dates specifically because on Yom HaShoah, especially on Yom HaShoah, it is important to remember that where we have been as a community, locally, nationally, and internationally. My great-grandfather, Justin Frankel, for who I am named for, was the leader of the Jewish community in Erlangen, Germany in the 1920s and 30s. In April 1937, he was arrested and imprisoned by the Gestapo, wrongfully and illegitimately charged for an unsolved murder that had occurred in 1929. Even after he was released 6 months later, he still wanted to stay in Germany. It was my great-grandmother, Frida, who eventually convinced him to leave, and they set sail for New York on August 10th, 1938. My ancestors were some of the lucky ones. They were able to get out. The theme of tonight's program is keeping the memory alive. I would like to once again thank Rabbi Joseph and the entire committee for putting this program together and giving a voice to those who have taken on the charge to ensure that we will never forget where we have been as a community and as a people. Thank you all for coming.
Erev Tov. I'm Rabbi Susan Grossman from Beth Shalom Congregation, and it's very moving for me to be here this evening because this is the last time that I'll officiate as the rabbi of Beth Shalom before I become emerita. And I've spent many years working with the committee, and they do a wonderful job every year, so I want to thank them. We are about to light the candles in memory of those who are gone. The human spirit is the light of God. As we look at these lights that we're about to light, try to imagine 6 million candles, each one with the name of another Jew. Each one would signify a unique and precious soul who struggled and had hope, who was part of a family, an orphan, a widow, or a widower. They worked, they studied, they took walks, the ordinary things of life. They celebrated birthdays and weddings, mourned at funerals. All were part of the Jewish people. Each one was a separate individual. Each one suffered, each one, and everyone was murdered. We will be calling up the children and grandchildren of survivors, as well as one survivor from our Yom HaShoah committee, who will be lighting the candles this evening. There'll be Judy Iliff and Rachel Burrows, Judy Gartner, Merle Silverstrom, Ross, and child survivor Ernest Hilsenrath, Toby Brooks, Sarah Baum and her son Corey Baum, and Diana Newman and Heather Teitelbaum. And so I'd ask you to come up one by one as we light the candles. Judy and Rachel. Mel Silverstrom, Ross, and Ernest Hilsenrath. It's a difficult memory, right? And that's why it's having a hard time doing it. It's a thing. Difficult memory here. And we have Toby Brooks. Sarah and Cora Brown. And Diana Newman and Heather Teitelbaum. This has never happened, by the way. I've been here 25 years. It never happened. Interesting. Interesting. Sarah Baum always saves the day. So. I think, I'm a rabbi, so I'm going to make a rush on this extemporaneously, if that's all right. Why is it so hard to light the candles for the first time? Well, we've had trouble before, but never like this. Why? I'm wearing a yellow ribbon in tragedy strike people, when there's atrocities, right? And so maybe one of the ways that the survivors are kind of sending a message to us is saying, wake up, stand up, say something, right? Don't just go through the motions. We have to be proactive and attentive to what's happening around us. So thank you for reminding me.
So I'm Rabbi Craig Axler from Temple Isaiah, and it is really a privilege to be here and part of our community's gathering tonight, and particularly a privilege to transition into this discussion, and really a discussion with dear neighbors, friends, and members of my community, Maury Kogel and his daughter Hannah Kogel, and to talk about really the thematic piece that this committee decided to focus on this year, the mitzvah, really, of keeping memory alive through the generations. And so I'm glad to be able to gather. And I want to ask Maury first, and just ask you to talk a little bit about when it is and how it is that you learned about your father's story, both in World War II and in the Holocaust, how you came to learn bits of his story.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'll be happy to share. And thank you, Rabbi Joseph, for your leadership and all of you on the committee that I've had a chance to get to know and love over the last few years. I've always knew that my father had survived a war, but I never really knew the depth of it until I was a teenager, just about Hannah's age. And my father had me at 53, so he was much older, and was a gregarious man. You know, Rachel, my wife, knew him well, and Hannah knew him as a small child, and he was one of those people that would just infect you with his laughter and a smile and witty jokes. So it was the pain that was subsumed deep within that never really came out. And so it was during a trip to Washington, D.C. I was born and raised in Denver, and we visited the Holocaust Memorial Museum, which had just opened. At the time, they were soliciting invitations to anybody that was a survivor to record their testimony. And this shadow passed over my father's face, and he sort of walked out and didn't even respond to my question. So I knew that I had touched a nerve, but I didn't understand exactly what I was getting at. And when we came back home, I had pestered him, and he relented and allowed me to interview him. And so we spent the remainder of that spring break in front of a tape recorder answering my questions. And I think that was the first time in his life that he truly unburdened the pain and the scars of what he'd endured. And so I took all of that information with me, and then it was Yom HaShoah, of all things, when I was a freshman in college, when the Hillel at the time was inviting us to do the reading of the names. And as I'm reading the names, I realized I have this amazing opportunity to talk to my dad, and I should ask him more. And so I transcribed all of the notes that he had shared, and then spent another week with him, interviewing him. And it was during those sessions where I had learned about the pain that he bore, the guilt of survival, and in the end, how proud he was to have been able to share that story with me, and how important it was for him to pass that on. And so that's how I first learned about it.
Thanks. And such an intensely, deeply personal experience of your father sharing his story directly with you. I'm grateful to have been able to read your father's story in a pre-publication form before your book, Running Breathless, came out, and to be able to really delve much more of a deep way into his story. I'd love to know kind of what led you to take his personal story and to invest the time and energy into really turning it into a book format, to really put the energy into sharing his story, not just inside of the intimacy of your family, but to share it out there in the world?
So I think there's sort of two parts to that. One is my father, and you've heard me say this during Hannah's bat mitzvah, commanded me during my bar mitzvah with a finger pointing to the sky and at me, both simultaneously, and said, "Remember that you are a Jew." I mean, and he said it with such a booming voice and with such poignancy, and he let the finger just stay and hover. And he let the glare like penetrate my soul. And that way in which he commanded that remembrance, I think had a greater effect on not just the story. My father meant, I believe, remember the traditions that we shared. We welcomed new Soviet immigrants to our house to celebrate the high holidays. He wanted me to connect with the traditions and the culture of our people and not view life as a victim, but embrace your Jewish identity. And so part of that comes with heavy history. And so that remember you are a Jew, I feel was part of a call. And the second part of it is when my father and I reviewed the 40-page outline that I'd had before I wrote his memoir, he sort of patted me on the leg and said, "I'm proud of you, I want you to write it." And so I promised him that I would. And sadly, I was unable to fill that promise. He would have been 100 this year. He passed when he was 91. But he knew that I planned to do that. And so when our son Jonah was born, I dedicated the time, and I'm just eternally grateful to Rachel for giving me the time and the support to ensure that I finished it. And so the book is the action of keeping the memory alive, to fulfill a promise to my dad and to remember that I am a Jew.
Beautiful. So Hannah, I was there to witness your father kind of pass that same legacy to you at your bat mitzvah, and I've had the chance to watch you grow up, as opposed to your brother, who's considerably younger than you.
Yeah.
You carry with you memories of your grandfather, childhood memories of your grandfather, and really more mature childhood memories of your grandfather, your dedushka. Would you share kind of some of the stories and the images that still stay with you now?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was so young when he passed. I was 7, but I still have so many vivid memories of him, and they were all just, he was just such a positive person, and he always made me feel loved. I remember early in the morning, he would be laying on the floor doing exercises in his 80s, doing crunches and stretches, and I remember I'd be in like a cute little pink pajama set and just be following him. Like, he was like this big teddy bear, and I just wanted to do everything he wanted to do. I would do crunches with him. I also remember my grandparents had a beautiful apple tree in their backyard. And during Passover, my cousins and I, while we were having Seder, decided to take baseball bats and hit the apples, maybe a little too close to our parents. And I remember he was like, "You can't do that." And I felt so mischievous and rebellious doing that. And he was a really big skier, and I've heard so many great stories of him. And I remember it was my first day at ski school when I was 5. And I came down the mountain from the bunny hill, and I remember seeing my parents, my grandparents on the fence, and he was like, "You can pick out one thing to get." I got clown makeup. But I would say all those memories still stick with me, but I would say the one that has stuck with me the most, whenever we would leave to say goodbyes, he would always stand at the end of the driveway, just waving. Even if you looked back, you were all the way down the road, he would still just be waving. And I would say the best way to describe that was I felt loved. I felt he was always with me. It was like a hug from a distance. He wasn't with me in the car, but he was still there. And it was like that every single time we would leave to go home, just waving at the end of his driveway. And I would say it's one of the best memories I have of him.
It is. It's such a beautiful image, and I think all of us can see that. We can see the car pulling away, and we can see him remaining there. And to some degree, there's an element to which this is somewhat generational. Older people staying and waving, and the goodbye that never ends, right? Yeah. But when you first shared that memory, and it struck this in me, and I wonder if you have a sense of whether that long goodbye and that lingering relates in some way to the experience that he had and that you learned as you grew older, only after his passing, of his experience in the Holocaust, his experience in World War II, whether you have a sense of what that means in that context.
I definitely think that it relates to him because I think he knows what it felt like to say goodbye in a terrible sense, and I think he wanted me to feel like this goodbye would last forever and that he would always still be there. So in my book that my dad wrote, so when Rabbi Axler, my dad and I were all sitting down, he made this connection to him leaving Dubno and to him waving goodbye to us. And I think that really, my dad and I really sat down and we were in the car. We were like, wow, this connection that Rabbi Axler made really made us feel even more connected to my grandfather even after he passed. And I would like to read something that my dad wrote.
Please do.
Okay.
And this, just before you read it, this is a section out of the book that describes the last time that my father was in his hometown.
I took one last walk around the town. I walked to my street but could not bear to go any closer to my house. I replayed in my mind the scenes from my happy, mischievous childhood. The soccer ball I made of my father's shoes. The Maccabee games, playing second baritone in the band. Peeking through the wall at Sarah's clients. Helping my mother prepare for Jewish holidays and the Sabbath. Going to the synagogue with my father, and again, I had the stabbing memory of waving off my brother when he begged to leave with me. Bleary-eyed, I wiped the tears from my face and turned to walk away from my home forever. I never saw Dubno again. As I took my seat on the train, I leaned my head against the window and noticed the grief in my reflection. As the train whistled and pulled away, I watched Dubno disappear into the twilight. My mind swirled with memories, eventually settling on the last Passover we spent together. I could see it vividly, the small gathering of our immediate family around the dining room table, with my father sitting next to me. I remember the planes flying overhead, my father looking up, then at all of us. And then I remembered his words, God only knows if we will be together next Passover. He knew. He would try to save Sarah. He would try to keep his family intact. But even then he knew that the wave of hatred and violence that was rising in the West could be too much to withstand. I was too naive to appreciate it then. How I wish I could go to him then, show him my gratitude for all he'd done for us, to let him know how I understood how difficult and painful the situation was. To tell him how proud I was of him. Then I thought of my brother and sister. I recalled all the soccer games with my brother and the many walks we would take while running errands for our mother. I loved how he looked up to me. I loved how he was so protective of Sarah. A smile creased my face as I remembered Sarah cursing me out when she learned that I used to peek at her clients through the wall. I was also her first baby brother. She used to play with me and tend to me as a child. I could feel the void within me now that they are gone. Finally, I thought of my mother. Aaron had said there was more to the story, but I wouldn't learn the rest for many more years. I never located Stashik, the clergyman, so I rode the train away from Dubno with more questions about my mother than answers. It was her strength and her grace that I remembered. As the train rolled into the night, memories of my mother washed over me. I recalled the Yiddish lullabies she used to sing as children. I closed my eyes, listening to her voice in my mind, and fell asleep. Thank you.
Rabbi, I just wanted to thank you because I and Hannah and I both never realized that the weight of that goodbye when my father would stand in the driveway. Ever since I went to college, and every time I'd come back for a visit, there he is standing, and in the rearview mirror, you could still see him until we were the ones to leave. And he must have perhaps carried those goodbyes with him every time, remembering, knowing that I want to make everyone last that much longer. So I appreciate so very much you finding that connection. And it is another call and a reminder of why we should keep this memory alive.
So there is no question that your father, your grandfather's story is one story and one individual. And part of the power of this gathering is that the innumerable stories, the 6 million plus stories, and then all of the stories of surviving, and all of the stories that are wrapped up in this are fading like that fading in the rearview mirror, except, of course, when we preserve their memory in second generation and third generation and beyond. And the reality is that telling your father's story, telling your Dadushka's story, is a way of preserving it into those next generations. I'm inspired by both of you and your commitment to the Jewish community and to joyful Jewish living. And what really struck me, and particularly Hannah, in a little bit over a month, you'll be standing at the Torah with your fellow confirmation students, reading from our Holocaust scroll at Temple Isaiah, and reading Torah as living representatives of that which goes on. And I was struck, and I want to share and close with the words that Professor Emil Fackenheim wrote and that he codified as this idea of a 614th commandment, the commandment beyond the 613. Fackenheim wrote, and I think this applies very much to the two of you and to all those who carry on second and third and beyond generations. He wrote, "We are commanded first to survive as Jews, lest the Jewish people perish. We are commanded second to remember in our very guts and bones the martyrs of the Holocaust, lest their memory perish. We are forbidden, thirdly, to deny or despair of God, however much we may have to contend with him or with belief in him, lest Judaism perish. We are forbidden, finally, to despair of the world as the place which is to become the kingdom of God, lest we help make it a meaningless place in which God is dead or irrelevant and everything is permitted. You live joyfully, actively, proudly Jewish lives, carrying the memory of Van Wolf Kogel with you and preserving the memory of all of those who perished in the Shoah and those who are the survivors. May all of their memories be for a blessing. Thank you for sharing all of these memories tonight."
Thank you.
We are fortunate to have the Howard County High School Gifted and Talented Orchestra with us. They will be playing 3 pieces. Ani Ma'amin, a song that was often sung in the camps. Schindler's List theme from the movie Schindler's List. And by the composer who survived the Holocaust, Gideon Klein, the 3rd movement for string trio.
Eila eskara v'nafshi olai eshbecha. These things I remember as I pour out my heart. Dr. Viktor Frankl wrote, "We who lived in the concentration camps can remember the people who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a person but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way."
And these 10 we remember. Shmuel Zeigelbaum was the leader of the German Jewish Workers' Union, known as the Polish Bund. Upon entering Warsaw in 1939, the Germans demanded the city government 12 hostages. Shmuel, who had taken part in the defense of the city, offered himself as one of the 12 in place of another. He escaped to Belgium, then London, and America, where he campaigned for the rescue of European Jewry. He took his own life in May of 1943 at the age of 48 to protest the world's indifference to the destruction of his people. His suicide note read, "By my death, I wish to express my strongest protest against the inactivity with which the world is looking on and permitting the extermination of the Jewish people. I know how little human life is worth, especially today. But as I was unable to do anything during my life, perhaps by my death I shall contribute to destroying indifference. My life belongs to the Jewish people in Poland, and therefore I give it to them."
Eddie Hillesum bravely served the Jews of Holland during the Shoah. Eddie was a volunteer social worker at Westerbork, a German transit camp for Jews and other foreigners who were sent to Auschwitz in freight cars that left the camp. She spent a year traveling between Amsterdam and Westerbork, offering comfort to her people, and then was imprisoned herself in Westerbork in 1943. Her diaries of her last 2 years in the camp attest her courage in caring for her people. Dutch farmers found a postcard she threw from the train as it left Westerbork. It read, "We left the camp singing." She died in Auschwitz in November 1943 at the age of 29.
Peter Fischel wrote of life in Terezin, "We got used to standing in line at 7 o'clock in the morning, at 12 noon, and again at 7 o'clock in the evening. We stood in a queue with a plate in our hand into which they laid a little warmed up water with a salty or coffee flavor, or else they give us a few potatoes. We got used to sleeping without a bed, to saluting every uniform, not to walk on the sidewalks. We got used to undeserved slaps, blows, and executions. We got accustomed to seeing people die in their own excrement, to seeing piled up coffins full of corpses, to seeing the sick amidst dirt and filth, and to seeing the helpless doctors. We got used to it that from time to time, 1,000 unhappy souls would come here, and that from time to time, another 1,000 unhappy souls would go away. The 15-year-old perished at Auschwitz in 1944.
Hannah Senish was a native of Budapest, Hungary, who made Aliyah to British Mandatory Palestine in 1939. 5 years later, trained as a paratrooper, she parachuted behind German lines to attempt to rescue Hungarian Jews detained for Auschwitz. She spent 3 months with the partisan resistance fighters, where she wrote her poem, "Blessed Be the Match," Ashrei Agufrir. It was her last poem. Captured and tortured, refusing to be blindfolded, Hannah was executed by a Nazi firing squad in 1944 at the age of 23.
I'm short, but I'm not that short. Thank you. Thank you. It's all good. אשרי הגפרור שנשרף והצית להבות. אשרי הלהבה בבערה שבערה בסתרי לבבות. אשרי הלבבות שידעו לחזור בכבוד. אשרי הגפרור שנשרף והצית להבות. Blessed is the match consumed in a kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that softly burns in the heart's secret place. Blessed is the heart with the strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed in a kindling flame.
Meryl Silverstrom Ross was born in a displaced persons camp in Austria after the Second World War. Meryl now lives in Howard County and is part of the generational chain of memory. Meryl always remembers and honors her father, Hyman Silverstrom, the sole survivor of his entire very religious family. He lost his parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, too many to count. He was the only one to remember them, and one of the few to remember his small hometown in Poland, where 5,000 Jews had lived before the war. His hometown today shows no sign of this prior Jewish life, except for a plaque where the cemetery had been. The Nazis took all the headstones and the top 6 feet of dirt to build their roads. Merle's son, Alan Ross, wrote when he visited Poland at the age of 17, at the gates of a concentration camp, "The memory will live, the memory will live, l'dor v'dor from generation to generation."
Jacques Fine was born in Paris, France in 1938. His sister Annette was born in 1940. His parents, Rosa and Shmuel, Karpik were Polish Jews who had immigrated to Paris in the hopes of staying safe during the war. After the German invasion and surrender of France in 1940, the Karpiks had the courage to send their two young children, Jacques, age 3.5, and Annette, age 1.5, into hiding with a Catholic family, the Bocahuts, outside of Paris. Shortly after, the government began to deport Jews to transit camps and later to concentration camps. For the first year, Jacques' mother visited the children in secret. The Jewish children were not physically concealed. Jacques was baptized to avert suspicion that he might be Jewish. Once the war ended, Jacques and Annette were placed in orphanages in France along with other displaced children who had survived the war. Although happy, they were still hopeful that they would see their parents again. Jacques and Annette were among the many children whose parents never came back, as both mother and father had died in Auschwitz. In 1948, Jacques and Annette were adopted by Harry and Rose Fine, a Jewish-American family from New Jersey. Jacques arrived at Ellis Island when he was 10, not knowing any English, but quickly acclimated to his new home, family, and country. After college, Jacques settled in Howard County to raise his family. Jacques dedicated his adult life to payback, his phrase for giving back, as a way to repay the kindness of all the people who saved him and his sister during and after the war. Jacques was an active member of the Howard County Jewish community until his death in 2017.
Rabbi Regina Jonas saw life as a journey of faith and service to people. Born in Berlin in 1902, she is the first woman ordained as a rabbi. In 1935, just as the darkness of Nazism was rising in Europe. Rabbi Jonas chose to remain in Germany to serve her people. Subjected to forced labor by the Nazis in 1941 and imprisoned in Theresienstadt concentration camp in 1942, her calling as a rabbi became stronger under duress. Of Rabbi Regina Jonas, it has been said, her synagogue was everywhere. She wanted to stay where her people were, just like Rabbi Leo Beck. Rabbi Jonas served the Jews of Germany as a teacher, pastoral caregiver, an interpreter of Jewish tradition, until she was murdered in Auschwitz in October 1944.
Arnold Newman was born in the small town of Kowal, Poland in 1923. 1 month after World War II began, the 16-year-old Arnold, upon learning the Nazis were coming to his town, decided to flee. He escaped before most of the male population of the town was killed and the women sent to concentration camps. Arnold made his way to France, where he was captured and sent to work in various coal mines and labor camps in Western Europe. Eventually, he was sent to Auschwitz, where the number 143414 was tattooed on his arm. Detailed records by the Nazis note this was on August 29, 1943. As the war neared its end, Arnold was among thousands of Jewish concentration camp prisoners sent on a death march from Auschwitz to Buchenwald. By the time the Nazis surrendered 6 months later, at age 22, he weighed 65 pounds. After recuperating in a hospital at the St. Ottilien Archabbey, Arnold went on to the displaced persons camp in Feldafing, Germany, where he met and married Paula Abramovitz, also a survivor of Auschwitz. Arnold and Paula Newman are the parents of Stephen Newman and Diana Newman, Howard County residents who honor their memory through this remembrance.
Sarah Baum, a Howard County resident, shares the story of her maternal family, Mawina Typhonbrunner Moses, who came from Radowitz, Poland. When war broke out, Sarah's grandparents set out on a horse and wagon towards the east away from the Germans who were attacking from the west. Because they were Polish citizens on Russian soil, they were sent to a Siberian labor camp near Novosibirsk, where Sarah's grandparents felled trees to supply the building of the railroad, while her mum, Mawina, aged 11, and her sister, Lila, aged 9, were too young to work and stayed in barracks and foraged for food when the temperature allowed. In 1944, the family was allowed to leave the camp but were unable to leave Russia, so they went by raft and then train to the opposite climate in Uzbekistan, where they worked and waited out the end of the war, returning to Poland. Illness, deprivation, and danger were constant conditions. Yet, they overcame obstacles and survived their imprisonment as a family unit. Sarah relates that her grandparents are a constant source of daily inspiration and adoration throughout her life.
For all those not mentioned or who we do not know, the Israeli poet Dan Pagis wrote this poem entitled "Written in Pencil in the Sealed Freight Car." Here, in this carload, I am Eve with my son, Abel. If you see my older boy, Cain, son Adam, tell him that I.
The Yiddish words to the next song were written by Hirsch Glick in the Vilna Ghetto in 1943, using a melody from a Cossack march song by the Pokros brothers. Glick was inspired by the news of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. Practicing this song for you for the first time in many years, I took inspiration from the brave men and women in Ukraine today. Sog nit kein Mul, als du gehst im letzten Weg, Hoch Himmeln bleien, verstellen bläue Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebankte Show, es wird erbeugten unser Trot mir seinen da. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebankte Show, es wird erbeugten unser Trot mir seinen da. From the land of the palm tree to the far-off snow, we shall be coming with our torment and our woe, and everywhere our blood has sunk into the earth, shall our bravery, our vigor blossom forth, and everywhere our blood has sunk into the earth, shall our bravery, our vigor blossom forth. This song was written with our blood and not with lead. It's not a song that birds sing overhead. It was a people among toppling barricades that sang this song of ours with pistols and grenades. It was a people among toppling barricades that sang this song of ours with pistols and grenades. We'll have the morning sun to set our day aglow, and all our yesterdays shall vanish with the foe. And if the time is long before the sun appears, then let this song go like a signal through the years. And if the time is long before the sun appears, then let this song go like a signal through the years.
Yizkor, today we remember their lives, their deaths, their legacy. We vow to keep the memory of those who perished alive. As Simon Dobnow exhorted the Jews of Riga on his way to the mass grave, open your eyes and ears. Remember every detail, every name, every sigh, the color of the clouds, the hissing of the wind in the trees, the executioner's every gesture. The one who survives must forget nothing.
Anima Amin, the song of complete faith. I believe with all my heart that the Messiah will come. And even if he tarries, I believe that he will someday arrive. Anima Amin, Anima Amin, Anima Amin, Anima Amin. Be'emuna shlema, be'emuna shlema, beviat HaMashiach, beviat HaMashiach, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin. Be'emuna shlema, be'emuna shlema, ve'af al pi she'yitmamea im kol ze ani ma'amin, ve'af al pi she'yitmamea im kol ze ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin. Be'emuna shlema, be'emuna shlema, im kol ze achakezo bechol yom sheyavo, im kol ze achakezo bechol yom sheyavo. Ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin, ani ma'amin.
We're about to recite El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer for those who've passed. So please rise. God full of mercy, God full of mercy, defender of widows and father of orphans, be not silent or restrained regarding the blood which has spilt like water. Grant proper rest beneath the wings of your presence, in the great heights of the holy and the pure, who like the brilliance of the heavens give light and shine for the souls of multitudes, of thousands of men, women, children, boys and girls who were killed and slaughtered, burnt and suffocated, and buried alive in the lands touched by the hand of the German oppressor and its followers. All those lost were holy and pure, and may the holy ones find their resting place in the Garden of Eden. And therefore may the Holy One of Mercy shelter them in the shelter of wings for eternity, and bind their souls with the bond of life. God is their inheritance, and may they find peaceful repose in their resting place. And let us say, Amen.
El Malei Rachamim Shochein B'meromim Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachar Kanfei HaShechina B'malot Kedoshim Kedoshim Utorim Kezohar Harakim Azhirim Nishmot Kol Achinu B'nai Yisrael Shemaseru et nafsham al kiddush Hashem Anashim Nashim V'tov Shenitbechu V'shenechneku V'shenisrefu V'shenehergu Al Kiddush Hashem Began Eden Began Eden Dehimenuchatam Hanabal Harachamim Hastirehem Besetek Rafecha Leolamim Utzror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmotehem Adonai Unachalatam V'yanuchu v'shalom Al Mishkevotehem V'nomar Amen.
Amen.
Mourner's Kaddish with the special edition of names of the camps toward the back of your books. Yitgadal,
Auschwitz,
V'yitkadash,
Watch,
Shmei Rabbah,
Ponar,
V'alma Divrach Yirute,
Baba Yar,
V'yamlich Malchute,
Majdanek,
V'chayechon U'vyomechon,
Birkenau,
Uvchaye Dechol Beit Yisrael,
Kovno,
Ba'gala Uvizman Kariv,
Janowska,
V'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Olmei Omaya. Yitbarach V'yishtabach
Theresienstadt,
V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam
Buchenwald,
V'yitnase V'yithadar
Treblinka,
V'yit'ale V'yithalal
Vilna,
Shmei Dekutsha
Bergen-Belsen,
Brichu, Leila,
Mauthausen,
Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata,
Dachau,
Tushberchata V'Nechemata,
Minsk,
Damiran Bialma,
Warsaw,
V'Imru Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Mimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'Imru Amen.
Amen. If you're comfortable remaining standing, would you please do so? In a moment, we will conclude with the singing of Hatikva. For this we pray. The memory of those who perished will be kept alive through our remembrance and deeds, here in the diaspora and in the land of Israel. As the prophet Ezekiel said, "V'natati ruchi bechem, v'chitem v'hinachti etchem al admatchem, v'datem ki ani Adonai dibarti v'asiti, ne'um Adonai, and I will put my spirit in you, and you shall live. And I will place you in your own land, and you shall know that I, the Eternal, have spoken and have done it, says the Eternal."
Kolor balevav pnima, nefesh Yehudi homia, urfatei mizrach kadima, ayin letzion Sophia, od lov datikvatenu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liotam chovshi be'atzenu, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim, liotam chovshi be'atzenu, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you to those who joined us on streaming. Zecher tzadikim livracha. May the memories of those who perished in the Shoah continue to be kept alive by our remembrances. Zecher tzadik livracha. May their memories be for a blessing. Amen.